When Mark accompanies his wife, Lucy, on a luxurious work retreat to a private island, he expects relaxation and networking. Instead, he uncovers a tangled web of betrayal, manipulation, and temptation. As Lucy grows closer to the enigmatic billionaire host, William, Mark is thrust into a storm of doubt and suspicion. When a shocking proposal from William pushes their marriage to the brink, Mark must decide whether to fight for their relationship or walk away. But this isn't just a story of heartbreak, this is a tale of resilience and retribution. Armed with a fierce determination, Mark embarks on a journey of self-discovery and ultimate justice. With shocking twists and an ending no one will see coming, this story explores the raw depths of love, betrayal, and the triumph of reclaiming one's life. The private island emerged on the horizon like a mirage, pristine sands, turquoise waters, and a sprawling villa tucked into lush greenery. This was the pinnacle of luxury, the kind you only see in glossy magazines. But for me, it felt more like a trap. The plane descended smoothly onto the island's airstrip, and as we disembarked, I glanced at Lucy. Her face lit up with a mix of awe and excitement. "We made it," she said, slipping her hand into mine. I managed a smile, though my stomach churned. This wasn't a vacation, it was a business retreat. At least, that's how it was framed. Jack, our company's CEO, had insisted that Lucy and I attend. William Fellows, the firm's wealthiest client, had invited senior executives and their spouses to his private island for the weekend. The goal? Strengthen professional ties and hopefully secure an exclusive deal with him. Lucy had been especially eager. As the client liaison for William, she'd spent months managing his account, and her excitement about the trip was palpable from the moment she got the invite. "He's charming," she'd gushed over dinner weeks ago. "Sophisticated. It's no wonder everyone wants to work with him." I'd shrugged it off at the time, chalking it up to her enthusiasm for the job. But now, as I watched her take in the grandeur of the island, I couldn't shake the feeling that her admiration for William wasn't purely professional. A fleet of golf carts awaited us at the airstrip, each driven by a member of William's staff. Lucy climbed into one with practiced ease, her laughter mingling with the ocean breeze as the driver made a light-hearted comment about the weather. I followed silently, taking in the surreal surroundings. The main villa came into view, an architectural marvel with sleek lines, massive glass windows, and an infinity pool that seemed to blend seamlessly with the ocean beyond. William greeted us on the veranda, his tanned face breaking into a charming smile. He was every bit as polished as Lucy had described, mid-40s, salt and pepper hair, and the kind of confidence that came from inheriting wealth beyond imagination. He shook my hand firmly before turning to Lucy with an unmistakable warmth. "Lucy," he said, his gaze lingering a beat too long. "It's wonderful to see you again." "You too, William," she replied, her voice bright. "This place is incredible." He waved a hand as if brushing off the compliment. "Just a little getaway. I'm glad you could both make it." The weekend unfolded in a blur of opulence. Days were filled with activities, snorkeling, kayaking, and lounging by the pool. Evenings were reserved for elaborate dinners, where wine flowed freely, and laughter echoed into the night. William played the perfect host, effortlessly charming everyone in attendance. But it was the way he interacted with Lucy that set my nerves on edge. He'd find her in every crowd, engage her in conversations that stretched on for hours. When she laughed at his jokes, it wasn't the polite laughter of a professional, it was genuine, delighted. And she wasn't alone in her admiration. Every woman at the retreat seemed captivated by him. But unlike the others, Lucy didn't seem to notice or care about the attention he garnered. She only had eyes for him. On the second evening, during dinner, I found myself seated across from Lucy and William. They were deep in conversation, their heads bent close together. I sipped my wine, forcing myself to join in the table's broader discussion. But my focus kept drifting back to them. The way her hand brushed his arm as she spoke. The way he leaned in as if her words were the only ones that mattered. "You okay, Mark?" Jack's voice broke through my thoughts. I blinked and turned to him. "Yeah, just a little tired." He nodded, clearly not buying it but too polite to press further. That night, as we returned to our suite, I decided to address the elephant in the room. Lucy had been unusually quiet, her typical chatter replaced by a contemplative silence. As she undressed and prepared for bed, I spoke up. "You and William seem to get along well," I said, keeping my tone neutral. She paused, glancing at me over her shoulder. "We do. He's fascinating, isn't he?" "I suppose. But don't you think you're spending a bit too much time with him?" Her brows furrowed. "Mark, he's our client. Building rapport is part of my job." "It's more than rapport," I said, unable to keep the edge out of my voice. "You're practically glued to his side." She sighed, pulling on her nightgown. "You're being ridiculous. It's not like that." I wanted to argue, to tell her how I felt, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I climbed into bed, the tension between us settling like a heavy blanket. The next day, William announced a private dinner for a select few. Lucy, of course, was invited. I wasn't. She left that evening in a stunning red dress, her excitement barely contained. "I won't be late," she promised, pressing a quick kiss to my cheek before disappearing into the night. I sat alone in the suite, a glass of scotch in hand, staring at the clock. Hours passed, and she didn't return. My mind raced with possibilities, each one darker than the last. Finally, just past midnight, the door clicked open, and Lucy stepped in. She looked radiant, her cheeks flushed, her eyes sparkling. "How was dinner?" I asked, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "It was wonderful," she said, slipping off her heels. "William is such a great host." I didn't press further. Her answers, or lack thereof, were enough. That night, as she slept beside me, I made a decision. Something wasn't right, and I was done ignoring the signs. Whatever happened on this island, it was going to change everything. The morning sun streamed through the villa's massive windows, casting golden light across the room. Lucy stirred beside me, her soft breathing a sharp contrast to the thoughts racing through my mind. She looked peaceful, almost innocent, as if the events of the past few days hadn't unsettled her in the slightest. I slipped out of bed quietly and made my way to the balcony. The ocean stretched out before me, endless and serene, mocking the chaos brewing within me. My mind replayed the interactions between Lucy and William, every glance, every touch, every laugh. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something, that there was a piece of the puzzle yet to be revealed. By the time Lucy joined me for breakfast, I had resolved to keep my suspicions to myself, for now. She greeted me with a kiss on the cheek, her mood light and carefree. "Good morning," she said, pouring herself a cup of coffee. "What's the plan for today?" I forced a smile. "More relaxation, I suppose. Maybe some snorkeling." "That sounds perfect," she said, beaming. "I think William mentioned hosting a barbecue this afternoon by the pool. It should be fun." Her casual mention of his name grated on me, but I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "Sure. That sounds good." The day unfolded as planned. We joined the other guests by the pool, enjoying the sun and the endless flow of drinks. William was the center of attention, as always, regaling the group with tales of his travels and business ventures. Lucy sat close to him, her laughter ringing out like music. I stayed on the periphery, observing, analyzing, and biding my time. As the barbecue wound down, William suggested a hike to a nearby viewpoint. Several of the guests declined, opting instead to lounge by the pool. Lucy, of course, was eager to join him. I hesitated, debating whether to go along or feign disinterest. "You coming, Mark?" William asked, his tone polite but devoid of genuine interest. "I think I'll pass," I said, forcing a smile. "You two go ahead." Lucy shot me a quick glance, but if she sensed my unease, she didn't show it. Within minutes, they were off, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I decided it was time to act. I'd spent enough of the weekend stewing in suspicion. If there was something going on, I needed to know. While Lucy and William were away, I slipped back into our suite and grabbed her phone from the nightstand. My hands trembled as I unlocked it, the familiar pattern she'd used for years suddenly feeling foreign. Her messages were unremarkable, work updates, chats with friends, nothing incriminating. But as I scrolled through her call log, one name caught my eye: William. The calls were brief, scattered over the past few weeks. They weren't frequent enough to raise alarms, but their existence was enough to stoke the flames of my doubt. Frustrated, I moved on to her photo gallery. There were no hidden folders, no suspicious images. It seemed Lucy had been careful, too careful. I returned the phone to its place and sat on the edge of the bed, my head in my hands. The answers I sought weren't here. If I wanted the truth, I'd have to confront her directly. But not yet. Lucy returned from the hike an hour later, her face flushed with exertion and a wide smile on her lips. "You should have come, Mark," she said, dropping onto the couch. "The view was incredible." "I'm sure it was," I replied evenly. "Did you have a good time?" "Of course," she said, her tone light. "William knows all the best spots on the island." Her casual mention of his name stung, but I let it pass. "That's good. I'm glad you enjoyed yourself." That evening, as we dressed for dinner, Lucy seemed more radiant than ever. She wore a sleek black dress that hugged her figure perfectly, her blonde hair cascading over her shoulders. She caught me staring and smiled. "What?" she asked, turning to face me. "You look beautiful," I said honestly. "Thank you," she replied, her eyes softening. "You're sweet." Dinner was another extravagant affair, held in the villa's grand dining room. The food was exquisite, the wine flowing freely. Conversation buzzed around the table, but I found myself withdrawing, lost in my own thoughts. Lucy, as always, was at the center of it all, her charm captivating everyone around her. Toward the end of the meal, William stood and raised his glass. "To good friends and great company," he said, his gaze sweeping the room before landing on Lucy. "This weekend wouldn't be the same without you all." The toast was met with applause and cheers, but I couldn't shake the feeling that his words held a deeper meaning. After dinner, the group moved to the terrace for drinks. The night was warm, the stars scattered across the sky like diamonds. I stayed close to Lucy, unwilling to let her drift too far from my side. But William, ever the gracious host, found his way to her, engaging her in a hushed conversation that excluded the rest of us. I clenched my jaw, the knot in my stomach tightening. The tension between us had reached a breaking point, and I knew it was only a matter of time before everything came to a head. Later, as we returned to our suite, I decided to test the waters. "You and William seem to get along really well," I said, my tone casual. Lucy glanced at me, her expression unreadable. "He's a great guy." "Why do you ask?" "No reason," I said, forcing a smile. "Just an observation." She didn't press further, but her silence spoke volumes. That night, as I lay awake beside her, I resolved to uncover the truth. Whatever secrets this island held, I would bring them to light. And when I did, there would be no turning back. The next morning, I woke early, my mind restless from the decisions I knew I would have to make. The air in our suite felt heavy, thick with unspoken tension. Lucy still lay asleep, her face serene, as if nothing in the world could disturb her peace. I envied her oblivion, though I wasn't sure if it was feigned or genuine. By the time she stirred, I had already showered and dressed, standing on the balcony with a coffee in hand. The ocean breeze did little to calm me. Good morning, she said, her voice groggy as she pulled herself out of bed. Morning, I replied without turning to face her. She came to stand beside me, her hand brushing my arm. You seem tense. Everything okay? Yeah, I lied. Just thinking about work. She sighed, leaning on the railing. You need to relax, Mark. That's why we're here, remember? I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Her words felt hollow, especially given the growing distance between us. By mid-morning, the group had gathered for brunch on the veranda. William, as usual, was the perfect host, charming and attentive. He moved effortlessly between conversations, but his gaze found Lucy more often than not. I couldn't tell if anyone else noticed or if I was the only one hyper-aware of their connection. The meal passed uneventfully, but as the plates were cleared and the guests dispersed, William approached us. Mark, Lucy, he said, his voice smooth as silk. I was hoping to have a quick word with you both. Lucy glanced at me, her expression curious. Of course, she said. William gestured toward the villa. Shall we? We followed him into his private office, a sprawling room lined with bookshelves and adorned with art that likely cost more than my annual salary. He closed the door behind us and motioned for us to sit. I want to thank you both for coming this weekend, he began, his tone warm. It's been a pleasure having you here. Thank you for inviting us, Lucy said, her voice cheerful. William smiled, his eyes lingering on her. I hope you've been enjoying yourselves. We have, she replied, glancing at me. Haven't we, Mark? I nodded. The island is beautiful. William leaned back in his chair, his expression growing serious. I wanted to discuss something delicate. He paused, his gaze shifting between us. Mark, you've probably noticed that Lucy and I have developed a strong working relationship over the past few months. I stiffened but said nothing. It's rare to find someone with her intelligence, charm, and dedication, he continued. She's been instrumental in managing my account, and I have the utmost respect for her. Thank you, Lucy said, her cheeks tinged with color. I want to propose something, William said, his voice steady. Something that might seem unconventional but could be mutually beneficial. My heart pounded as he spoke, a sickening sense of foreboding settling over me. Lucy, he said, turning to her, I've grown quite fond of you. I value our connection, both professionally and personally. I'd like to spend more time with you, alone. Lucy's eyes widened, and she shot a glance at me. William, I don't think. He held up a hand. Hear me out. I'm not asking for anything permanent. Just the remainder of the weekend. I'll ensure you're compensated generously for your time. Excuse me. I said, my voice low and dangerous. William met my gaze, his expression calm. I mean no disrespect, Mark. This is simply an offer, one I believe could benefit all of us. The room fell into a heavy silence, broken only by the sound of my breathing. Lucy looked as though she'd been struck, her face pale and her mouth slightly open. Are you out of your mind? I finally said, my voice rising. You think you can just buy my wife? It's not like that, William said smoothly. This is about mutual understanding and consent. Nothing more. I stood abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. We're done here. Mark, wait, Lucy said, her voice trembling. I turned to her, disbelief etched across my face. Are you seriously considering this? She looked away, her hands wringing in her lap. I don't know what to say. William rose from his seat, his demeanor unruffled. Take some time to think it over. There's no pressure. I didn't respond. Instead, I stormed out of the office, the sound of my footsteps echoing through the villa. I needed air, space, anything to escape the suffocating reality of what had just happened. I found myself on the beach, the waves crashing against the shore in a rhythmic cadence. My mind was a whirlwind of anger, betrayal, and disbelief. How had things spiraled so far out of control? Lucy's hesitation spoke volumes, and the implications were crushing. After what felt like hours, I heard footsteps behind me. I didn't turn, knowing instinctively who it was. "Mark," Lucy said softly. "What do you want?" I asked, my tone sharper than I intended. She hesitated. I didn't know he was going to say that. "I swear." "Did you?" I demanded, spinning to face her. "Because it didn't seem like you were quick to shut it down." Tears welled in her eyes. I was shocked. I didn't know how to react. "You didn't know how to react?" I repeated, my voice rising. "How about saying no? How about telling him to shove his offer where the sun doesn't shine?" She looked down, her shoulders slumping. "You're right. I should have." I ran a hand through my hair, trying to rein in my emotions. "This isn't just about William, Lucy. This is about us. Our marriage. Do you even care about that anymore?" Her head snapped up, her eyes blazing. "Of course I care. How can you even ask that?" "Because you didn't defend us in there," I said, my voice breaking. "You didn't defend me." She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "I made a mistake," she said, her voice pleading. "Please, let's not let this ruin us." I stared at her, torn between the love I still felt and the deep wound her actions had inflicted. Finally, I shook my head. "I need time to think." Without another word, I turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone on the beach. The evening sky was a mix of deep orange and violet as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the beach. I walked slowly, my mind heavy with the weight of the past few days. The confrontation with Lucy had left me hollow, the cracks in our marriage now wide and gaping. Yet, there was a strange clarity in my anger. For the first time in years, I felt resolved, about us, about her, about my next steps. By the time I returned to the villa, the party was already in full swing. Laughter and the clinking of glasses echoed from the terrace. I entered through the side door, avoiding the main crowd, and made my way to the suite. It was empty. Lucy must have already joined the others. I went to the balcony, peering down at the gathering below. William, as always, was at the center of it, his charm drawing people like moths to a flame. Lucy stood nearby, her laughter carrying over the breeze. She looked radiant, like she didn't have a care in the world. The sight twisted something deep inside me. I turned away, grabbing my bag from the closet. This trip was over for me, in more ways than one. Quietly, I packed my things, slipping my phone into my pocket. But before I left, I made one final move. I forwarded every text message, every call log, and every piece of correspondence I'd collected from Lucy's phone to myself. If there was a fight coming, I wasn't going to be unarmed. As I zipped up my bag, the door opened. Lucy stepped inside, surprised to see me. "Mark," she said cautiously. "What are you doing?" "I'm leaving," I said, my voice firm. Her face fell. "What? You can't just leave. We need to talk." "We've done enough talking," I replied, slinging the bag over my shoulder. "You made your choice, Lucy. Now I'm making mine." "Wait," she pleaded, stepping in front of me. "You're blowing this out of proportion. William doesn't mean anything." I cut her off. "Doesn't mean anything? He offered to buy you for the weekend, and you didn't say no. That means something, Lucy. It means everything." Her eyes brimmed with tears. "I made a mistake. Please, Mark. Don't do this." I hesitated, her words tugging at the part of me that still loved her. But then, I remembered the look in her eyes when William made his offer, hesitation, not rejection. That was all the answer I needed. "I'm done," I said, stepping around her. "Goodbye, Lucy." The ferry ride back to the mainland was quiet, the hum of the engine and the soft lapping of waves the only sounds. I stared out at the dark sea, my thoughts a mix of relief and sadness. This was the end of one chapter, but it didn't feel like the start of another. It felt like limbo. When I reached the mainland, I checked into a small hotel near the airport. Sleep eluded me, so I pulled out my laptop, opening the files I'd forwarded from Lucy's phone. At first, it was the usual, work emails, mundane texts with friends. But then I found a series of messages exchanged with a number saved as W. The texts were brief, cryptic. Plans. Times. Locations. They weren't overtly incriminating, but they didn't need to be. My gut told me everything I needed to know. I traced the number back to William's personal line. Of course. Scrolling further, I found a voicemail. My hands shook as I pressed play. "Lucy," William's voice purred, smooth as silk. "I hope you've thought over my offer. I think it's something we could both benefit from, personally and professionally. Let me know." I slammed the laptop shut, the anger in my chest flaring anew. But it wasn't just anger, it was determination. 2 weeks later, William's perfect world began to crumble. It started with an anonymous email sent to the board of directors at his company. Attached were screenshots of his messages to Lucy and recordings of his voicemails. The accusations of harassment and unethical behavior spread like wildfire, splashing across headlines and dominating industry gossip. His company launched an internal investigation, and William was forced to step down as CEO within days. As for Lucy, she returned home to find her life in shambles. The house was empty, my belongings gone. A stack of divorce papers sat on the kitchen counter, next to a note, "You wanted freedom. Here it is." But the surprise ending wasn't for her. It was for me. 3 months later, I received an unexpected call from one of the firm's partners, a woman named Charlotte who had been at the island retreat. She'd seen through William's facade long before I had, and when the fallout hit, she reached out to me, not with pity, but with respect. She admired how I'd handled the situation, how I'd walked away with my integrity intact. Our conversations became regular, then personal, then something more. By the end of the year, we were planning a trip, not to an island, but to the mountains. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere real. Lucy and William thought they could play their games and win. They underestimated me. My revenge wasn't in destruction, it was in rebuilding my life, stronger and happier than ever before. And that, I realized, was the sweetest ending of all.